A pleasure to welcome to the program a personal friend of mine from way back, decades back. We're going to be talking in that vein. His name is Stephen Neskis. He's visiting us here in New York City, although he's spent a good deal of time here himself, but he's sort of based down in Virginia Beach, a beautiful town down in the state of Virginia. And he's an old friend of mine, and we knew had common acquaintanceship with a major figure that I would like to sort of pay homage to here at the outset. Before we swing right into the conversation, and that being the person of Richie Havens, who was an associate and a friend of ours back in the days of the day that we're celebrating this. Let's mark this day. This is August 15 of the year 2013, and it's the 44th anniversary. This day was the kickoff day for what has come down in history as the Woodstock Nation Day. It was the first day of the actual performing at the Woodstock Festival way back in August 15th of 1969, and we're going to be celebrating that. And that event was kicked off by our dear friend who finally got singing and got the music rolling that went on for days on end, that being Richie Havens. And that said, welcome, Stephen, so much to Conversation. Great pleasure to welcome you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Harold, celebrating with you the anniversary of Woodstock, a momentous occasion that a lot of people may or may not be aware of, but it is something of importance, a milestone for mankind, that peace and love and tuning in instead of tuning out of what people were saying was important, and it culminated to a happening, something that began something special.
Yeah, it signaled something special. Mm-hmm. It was very momentous, and we're going to be playing the day after this program airs. We're going to air an interview we did with Richie way back with his colleague Richard Savage, and also Kevin Saunders when they were talking about future TV and so forth. But that's a highlight for tomorrow's programming as you watch this program. But anyway, so it goes back, and I wonder, I guess people do remember it. There was a whole lot going on at that time. And you had been in association with, I was there at the festival when he kicked it off, and everybody was there. I don't know, 500,000, 600,000 people in an oxbow field up at Yasker's farm in White Lake, about 60 miles south of Woodstock, when it got started, and everybody was there, and Wavy Gravy had started passing out food, and the fences had come down, and the thing was off, and everybody was saying, music, music, and the first song to be sung, it came billowing up over the field, was Richie singing Freedom, and he kicked it off, and the music didn't stop for 4 days. It was quite an event. A big party,
It was that. He shared a story about that. I got lucky to meet him, and we'll discuss that later on down the show. But he was actually not scheduled to be the first musician, but they couldn't get the first act on stage because of all the people. So they flew him up in a helicopter, and he says, at first he didn't want to do it, man. They had to talk him into it because they, people were like waiting for music. They were screaming, music, music, music.
The vibe was, as they said in those days, the vibe was intense.
Yeah.
Music, for crying out loud.
Yeah, and he's, man, they're going to eat me alive, So he says, no, I'm not going to do it. And so he finally conceded, I'll do it. And they flew him up in this helicopter. And as he came up over it, he could see through the bubble. There was more than 500,000. There was like 700,000 at least, maybe even 1 million strong. And he was going, wow, this is a happening. This is an event. And he played what he's now famous for, Freedom, and he played for 3 hours straight before other acts could get mobilized.
Was it that long? His
3 hours, yeah.
Was it really?
3 hours.
Really, I didn't realize that. I didn't remember. I remember the refrain of Freedom coming up, and it just washed over the whole crowd, and it was wow, and we're off, right? And so God bless him and everything for that, and he's just a beautiful musician, and that had been preceded by the Monterey Festival, some people will remember, and there was the poetry of Bob Dylan at the time, was singing, there was something blowing in the wind that was intuitively being picked up by the planet. We had just landed on the moon just a few days before that, and there was all kinds of events going on. But this was a party, but it was also picking up intuitively on a sense that there was something major going on. And Bobby Dylan was right on the money with his poetry at that time, yeah.
Yeah, there was so many things happening at that time. Timothy Leary was telling people to tune out and tune in, and people were seeking that there had to be something more than just this war and this mediocrity that was occurring. And movies like Reefer Madness was going on. You smoke a joint and then you would end up raping people and stuff. So all these lies were being told, and people got sick of it. They wanted to find out, why are we here? And that era, that special '69 was a year of dreams. Kennedy said, we're going to the moon. We were goal orientated. I think that's what we've lost in our society, in our common Congress now. That in our presidency, we had a goal. Let's go to the moon, not because it was easy, because it was hard. Let's tune out of society and tune into ourselves, not because it was easy, because it was necessary and it was hard. That to be discovering what we needed to become a new civilization. And there was something happening technologically as well.
Thank you.
That we were actually transcending scarcity.
Wait a minute. Now, that's the thing that you throw lightly off. And to me, that is the major paradigm shift that may have been signaled by that moment of '69, because there were things going on at a larger level that did impinge over and include things like the political and the economic and the kind of things that are practical sides of the human equation that was being signaled a new era at the level of capability that was developing, and that was intuitive. But don't forget, you had the civil rights thing, Dr. King,
absolutely,
Malcolm X. You had Vietnam going. You had the assassination of Dr. King and of Robert Kennedy, and you had all of these kind of things that were going on that had significance to the real world. And then you had Nelson Rockefeller, governor of California, hearing the reports, and he declared it a disaster area, and that nobody could go because what in the hell? How are people going to eat? How are they going to do anything? And it all just came, like, as you say, the term was at that time was a happening, and it was an epiphany that just went on. It went on. It had gone on before the actual day of the festival, and then it also went on sometime afterward. And it's remembered as a major event to mark that moment in the evolution of, one could say, consciousness, or the evolution of the whole system that is involved with the operation of what some people came to be called Spaceship Earth, and they were beginning to get a sense of a qualitative transformation that was blowing in the wind. Seems to me, if I may, one last little thing on this, I think in the fullness of time, if we make it, I think a case could be made, and if we can get to it as a broad society within an ecological context, a case can be made for 1969 or 70 being seen as year one, because there was a qualitative transformation, a borning that was being picked up intuitively, and that qualitative transformation should be up on the table of the considerations of our major decision makers, including the intellectual class and the political class, as a context within which the operating manual or the political and economic agendas by which we're going to design our institutions ought to be formulated, which seems never to come up, to signal that was a time of qualitative transformation at the level of capability, not the reality. We've been wandering 40 years in the wilderness, like the Hebrews of old and so forth. But anyway, that's a point to be made, that it wasn't just a big party. It was signaling something much larger.
Yeah, it was signaling something much larger. I don't think people understood, because science was so new about, in the form of capability, that we had transcended scarcity. But in a spiritual sense, we knew that something was blowing in the wind, and that's why, Bob Dylan could create that, and we were singing freedom, and we were tuning out of what society was trying to give us as truth, and tuning in, because there was something happening. So there was I would like to say, not just in a capable sense, but in a transforming sense, that in a reality point, that we were actually learning what that meant, in the capable side. How do we apply it to society? And of course, we started out that way, but it ended up in the me generation, and the bean counters took over, and money took over, and it kind of washed out that thought that we could have a transformation, a qualitative transformation to society as a whole, that all or a majority of human race could have sustainability and a continuum of abundance. I mean,
okay, yeah.
So
there's a very popular book on the New York Times best-selling list whose title is Abundance.
Abundance, yes.
Now that's something that is thought of as ipso facto absurd as one looks back over the 200,000-year history of the Homo sapiens species.
Yeah.
And because it has always been assumed, and the reality at the level of capability, extended capability, technology, tools, and the computer revolution was all ahead of us and everything like that, but that there were modelings that measured it, that we were, in a sense, we throw that term out loosely, you and I sitting here talking, we were transcending in a reality, in a capability sense, which could inform the reality, the practical reality, the ironclad laws of scarcity. That
Right.
we were transcending material scarcity, and that is a qualitative transformation that was being signaled, and it's never mentioned in the political class or in any of the other, because the institutions that we inherited out of history had all been formulated within a condition from the day we came out of the cave to about 1970 by the modeling of scarcity as the reality.
Right.
And the institutions reflected that. So if I win, you lose. Zero sum. All the geopolitical thinking about realpolitik and so forth had been formulated within a certain condition that was being qualitatively transformed.
Right.
And that's such a big idea. It should be up on the table with all the
definitely.
political organizing
Yes.
principles that you hear in what we call the news now. So it's been overlooked as something and thought of as just ipso facto absurd, also because that has to include the ecological order,
Yes.
which is now coming into the fore now. But that is a signaling of a qualitative, not just a quantitative historical change. A qualitative transformation is in the offing, which is something that's very hard because it's so very new.
Right. So far as capabilities, we started with the steam engine, and that kind of gave us the ability to have abundance. And and finally, by the date that you concurred to is about 1970.
Well, that's what it was. Most of I'm going on modeling.
Modeling, yeah. That 50% have now in a capability sense to have abundance.
Well, that was there was a number, if I may, Stephen.
Right.
That's a big issue.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
you got two vectors upon which you can look at that, if I may. I don't want to go off, but one would be that we have a unique capability to have a self-reflective consciousness that can answer the larger questions about what's it all about, what's the universe, these kind of questions that is probably not characteristic of any of the other biologicals
species
that we can think of other than ourselves,
right.
Much less the predecessor biological entities out of which we were to emerge a couple 100,000 years ago in an evolutionary sense. So, and one of those and then we also had the ability to extend consciousness. That movie, the movie that they made of, what's the movie, the famous movie where the Australopithecines are at the beginning, Space Odyssey.
Okay, Space Odyssey.
Signaling that they came out of the cave, all the resources were, but we had a liaison with extending our technology, our consciousness in technology, and could make the world other than in the Eden-like sense is the state you are when you're embedded in nature. So that was getting to the point where the weapon systems that was used in order to gain what is called political legitimacy by one tribe over another, particularly after civilization, was the ability to conquer. Whoever had the biggest club could win. The club, in the sense of a weapon system.
Sure.
And those weapon systems, according to the modeling, finally, despite the frightening thing of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, reached lethal proportion for the whole species, as the modeling shows, about the year 1970.
Right.
So we had the ability to stop evolution consciousness in universe that we have never have historically. On the other side, we had a modeling capability, that our capability was such that we could get the percentage of the world's population that could be realistically seen to be have with good design. What does it mean to be a have? What does that mean? And that we were that you could axiomatically say there was a higher percentage of the world population could be seen to be haves through time. You need a definition of terms, what it means, and so forth. But that percentage was going up, was practically flat throughout all of our existence, and then it went up hyperbolic, and then it began to go, and it's moving exponential, and it crossed the 50% mark by much modeling. That we were that there were more have-nots at the level of capability about 1970. These two things coalesced in that same year, that same era.
And that's why I have a book coming out and a whole album called Grow Up or Blow Up.
Yeah, right. That sort of sums it up.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we have both capabilities coming simultaneously. Either we're going to surpass our fears and utilizing the blow-up side, or we're going to transcend using the technology of capability to grow up. And that's what I've been working on for so many years. That's how we met.
Let's go back to when we met. It was around, we met, I knew him before, I think you, but we met and everything. And maybe you could tell the story. I knew Richie for quite a long time. We did programs together. I love the guy,
Yeah, he's a brilliant man. I was in Tribeca. I just moved into Tribeca, and saw Richie Havens with Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Yeah, okay.
And I said, oh man, that guy could work with me on the project. Now, how I got to New York, it was kind of interesting. I heard New York City going bankrupt, and I was on my Hobie Cat, and I had a restaurant on the beachfront.
Hobie Cat is a boat.
Yeah, Hobie Cat's like a catamaran.
That down in Virginia.
In Virginia Beach, Virginia.
That's a great town.
Yeah, it's a great town, great town. And I said, how can the financial capital of the freaking world go bankrupt, man? I'm going to take off to the islands. I know the world's gone mad. And little internal voice, call it your spirit, your consciousness that we call consciousness, said, why don't you go find out why? And I said, oh man, don't make me do this. Let me go out to the islands and go surfing, because that's all I did was surf and sail and run the restaurant, and I was happy doing that. And so I said, okay, let it be so. And 2 projects brought me to New York, and I said I didn't know why I was here, but I would start at the bottom and work my way up, and I would write about it, and that's been the process for almost 40 years. And when I saw Richie Havens with Peter, Paul, and Mary, I came back to a friend of mine. He was another musician. He was about 90-year-old at that time. His name is Daniel Teagarden, and I said, I found somebody that's gonna possibly work for the album, for the music soundtrack. And he goes, who? I said, Richie Havens. And he goes, ain't that a kick? He's going to be playing at Abbey Roads, and he's going to be hanging out with me. You'll meet him.
That day, right?
That day. So, and he goes, oh, and here, look at this little article. And it was about beach people, and they were writing about him. And I happened to come because I had a restaurant, and I would bring some food, and we would, just hang out and talk about anything and everything. And the lady that was writing the article about him says, what does he do? And he said, oh, he's a movie maker. And what's the movie called? At that time it was called Dare to Be Free. And he goes, and he showed me the article. He goes, now you got to do it, because word for word it was in there. And he goes, now you got to do it. And I said, yeah, but now you're in it. So that's how I wrote the script, and I kind of followed this, what was blowing in the wind. And I knew something was blowing in the wind in capability sense and in love sense. But I also saw the other sword, which was the blow-up side. So we had to find out what that was about. So again, I met Richie for the 3rd time, and with a good friend of yours, Frank. And he goes,
Patricolo,
yes.
The team Null and Void, the greatest poetic posing as poet or comic posing as poets. The great stand-up comic team.
Yeah, he was Nolan
brilliant.
Boyd, and they had a record company called Splash Mountain Records, and he interviewed me, and he goes, you're a visionary. I want to put you in the video department of our record company. And I went, but I'm only a photographer. He said, no, you'll learn. So I learned the video business as a grip, starting with the boom mic, and then at the Opus 40 when Richie Havens was walking down there, performed.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
And I learned from that. And he says, by the way, Richie's going to be at a friend of mine's house, Harold Hudson Channer, and it was his birthday, and we're celebrating his birthday, and I'll personally introduce you to him. And sure enough, Richie comes in with his entourage, Savage, and all those people, and Richard Savage, and he looks at me for the third time. He sees me. He goes, "You," and he goes, "Rich, I want you to meet Steve Neskis," and then. We embraced, and I said, hey, I got a project I would like to talk to you about, man. It's really special.
Is that when we aired the thing with Leary?
Yeah.
We had a little party to watch the program.
Yeah, and it was just about the time your talk show, it's about 11 o'clock at that time?
I'm not sure.
It was evening hours.
Shifted over the ages.
Yeah, and just as we met, you said, hey, we gotta to watch this talk show that I just did with Timothy Leary. So we sat down, and sure enough, Timothy goes, and I said to Richie, I said, what the 30-year-olds are going to know, the 20-year-olds are learning, and it's being handed down like generation after generation. And he goes, yeah, man. And then Timothy Leary said the same thing, and we looked at each other and went, deja vu, baby. And then I worked with him from then on a Common Ground album.
That was a Common Ground album.
We did stuff with him and as a talk show host, got to know you and worked, effectively as a videographer, then produced. We did the Valdez spill when we marched around the United Nations and sang, and ended up in the West. What was that? It was a club west in Tribeca, and you had interviewed not only it was who was it? Was it from?
I don't know. I'm off track.
Tori Amos or somebody like that. It was a very famous singer, upstate New York, from the
music.
Music wise, it was and so it was like this happening. We were just making it happen. Every day was a new adventure, and that and Richie was always a kind person.
Beautiful guy.
He always allowed the person to feel like you were on his level.
Yeah.
He never believed that he was above you or anything of that nature. He always wanted people to have as much abundance as he had, and he was probably he just oozed love. If anybody could be a poster boy for love and peace, and that's why I'm wearing my peace shirt today, and I'm acting in my musician style mode. I want to honor Richie and his love, that he gave us a privilege to celebrate freedom and be all that we can be.
And I think we started out this program talking about this is the 15th now. This is the 44th anniversary of that event, and that's a singular event in the minds of many. There's other things going on. But it's also, Richie passed recently. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, if I did, but he had himself cremated, and his remains are going to be spread over Max Yasker's farm this Saturday coming up, the 18th, by his own wishes, in order to commemorate that major event.
I know my father got ill, and I couldn't make it to the funeral memorial service, and I was waiting for this, and my father just now passed, and I'm honoring my dad, Andrew.
Steve. Yeah, he was a beautiful guy.
Yeah, he was a special being, 96 years old.
Bless him.
And he had the same kind of love that Richie had. Always encouraged people to live life to the fullest.
I've got tape of that man down. He's 95 years old, and he's up there dancing his full head off, and really dancing, really pushing that thing. Does he string the?
He did.
Your cypriot, right?
Yeah.
You put the
going
towel around in the
napkin and twirled that napkin.
And laughing and carrying on.
He did. At 96, he danced at the bazaar. As soon as he came out of the hospital the first time, he did. Unfortunately, he was having a light brain bleed, and it ended. But it, we don't know how much time we have on the planet. So it's important that we all effectively do what we can do, because life is too short. And for myself, my life work as a restaurateur, a musician, videographer, producer, now a systems thinker, as I'm growing into the
and a networker of the new media.
Because
you follow all that Twitter and that Facebook and all that stuff too, and that's a whole new another realm that's happening.
Another realm,
communications.
Yeah. That's the next biggest mechanism. And everybody hears this. Friend me at Facebook. It's Steve Neskis. The next evolution is the community coming together with the knowledge that we have to own the capability.
Wait a minute, that's a word that is verboten in many people's vocabulary. Ownership's an evil thing because it's all done by about 2% of the world population.
Right.
Owns everything, yeah.
Well, it's just like there's a site called CESJ, Center for Economic and Social Justice, and Norm Kurland, a brilliant man that worked with people like Louis Kelso.
Well, Louis Kelso.
And they got ESOP law passed during the Ronald Reagan administration.
Wait a minute, go a little slower. ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan. That was the thing that some of the financial people would realize, the meaning of it. And got quite a lot done in that direction, but not nearly as much as they ought.
No, but it's
society in general.
I think it's like this. Every time, the greatest improvement, and the scientists have proven this already, if you try to randomly take a checkerboard and make them, opposite, it would take forever if you started from scratch and tried it and then started from scratch and tried it. So what effectively became very easy to do was, as you just made changes, you grew to this point and you made changes, you can actually make it work, and it becomes rather quickly it can be effective. So
that would be a quantitative change within a pattern,
right,
as opposed to a qualitative change, which is sort of comparable to the emergence of a new species out of old order of organization of the material world, and the right to the chemical level and the molecular level.
Right.
That would be the emergence of a new, the whole process of evolution that sees new species evolving, which we may be on the verge of beginning the first stages of realizing now, 40 years
Yeah,
after.
absolutely. I mean, people are panicking about it. Some people are fearful of it. But speciation is occurring. I mean, it's already, we have these things called test tube babies, and now they're talking about using 2 males to have a baby in 10 years. The capability is definitely there.
Well, that capability that was qualitatively transformed at the level of capability around 1970, the modeling shows, is unrelenting. It's going it's going exponential now.
Right.
And exponential goes very flat for thousands of years, and then it goes. And in a process called, in evolutionary theory, it's punctuated equilibrium, the new appears.
Right. And the thing that we want to caution ourselves is the grow up and blow up side, is that the spiritual part of that has to coincide exponentially, and it also often lags, and it creates a problem, with all the isms that we have, people putting things on trips on people, and guilt trips and stuff like that. But if we can spiritually help each other move up with love being the highest order, with that power, and to put influence on our elected officials, the money, this new outdated modalities like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid that we all been complaining about can be replaced with a new program called from the ESOP plan, which is called
binary
economics.
Well, yes,
and basically, if I could share basically what that is that we should all own the capital production. If we could own it from birth, and have the compounding of wealth, that a man being born today with the figures that they have, okay, you bailed out the banks at $16.6 trillion. At 0.1%, you can prime the pump for civilization as well. Besides just the banks, I mean, you give a subsidy to the oil companies at $1 billion. You subsidize the farmers. So there has to be a priming of the pump.
The industrial farmers.
Yeah, you have to prime the pump for civilization. So binary economics, which you can see on the site of cesj.org, and click on the Capital Homestead Act. That would be the first step. Okay, there's a tab up there. Click on that. A child being born today would make $1.6 million in dividends.
Over what period of time?
Their lifetime.
Uh-huh.
A child being born today would be $1.6 million in dividends, $465,000 in savings, with a retirement of $46,000 a year. Now, as that increase,
constant dollars,
right?
Uh-huh.
As that increase, you would take out the outdated modalities, which was, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and the job, which we all will still have, but it won't be as important as owning the capital production. And that job was a Keynesian model, and Louis Kelso, when he shared it with Ronald Reagan and who was the other fellow?
I'm not sure who you're talking about.
Ronald Reagan and the guy.
Stockman? I don't know.
The guy that was in the Ways and Means Commission.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, he didn't share it with Ronald Reagan at all. He shared it with Russell Long.
Russell Long
was,
and Ronald Reagan approved of it.
Well,
Russell Long comes running in and saying, "I'm no longer a Keynesian."
Well, he came into the Senate.
Yeah, he has. I am a Kelsonian.
Yeah, a couple things, if I could just interject, is that, and it's a larger issue other than just economic theorizing, is that we're going to have a system that's going to be able to subsume the outdated institutions rather than overthrow them.
Right.
In the historical pattern, one tribe comes along with an advanced technology that gives them an advantage so they can go conquer.
Right.
And they can make their tribe strong necessarily so we have the whole history of mankind from Babylon to Egypt to the Roman Empire to the crowned heads of Europe and to that sort of thing. But what we have is a situation where we can have something that can be inclusive of the outdated institutions without overthrowing them. We will build upon them quantitatively, but then we will also have an element of qualitative transformation that will be able to move the whole process into a level that wasn't possible historically.
Right, and this is where,
So everybody can be able to relate to it,
right,
rather than have, as is now, everybody's trying to find out who is the enemy that's causing things not to work right, because the ownership of all the assets is held by a tiny class.
Right.
Everybody else is dependent upon a job for getting income distribution and buying power to the people.
Right.
And that's coming a cropper because the robotics and so forth are displacing the traditional role of labor in terms of a means by which you can distribute demand, and that's a problem that has to be addressed. And one way would be is to build the capital formation in a way where the ownership is distributed democratically as a means of distributing buying power, or what they call effective demand.
Right, and that's what CESJ is
well, CESJ and others.
But I like to focus with Norm.
Yeah, it's very good. The Capital Homestead is a good, interesting
I think that he's got it a good piece of that puzzle. I think second piece of the puzzle, because I'm creating the social structure that can go out to the masses.
Yeah, talk about that if you want.
Well, I'm only going to discuss lightly because I'm in quiet stage of launching this, so I can't go into too much of it. But once the one that opens up the 10 that opens up the 10 times 10 times 10, you got 10,000 locations of people being able to share this new mechanism and shine the light and tell Congress that corporations aren't people anymore. We own the corporations. people are people, and K Street can now leave. And just like 60 Minutes shined the light about insider trading, and they all decided, well, this is not good to do anymore. That's the kind of evolution and revolution that has to occur in a massive scale of understanding. Once we get that understanding together, then the change will happen. So that's what I'm working on as my life's work, is creating that mechanism that allows
you want
enough
to do
people.
like coffee shop?
Well, I can't go into.
Sorry, you don't want to.
I don't want to go into.
Okay.
It goes more than just into that.
Yeah,
but,
I know. Yeah.
I just don't want to go into because I'm in quiet time. I can't.
Yeah.
do
Okay.
that.
Right. Yeah. And you're also involved in music.
Music, big time.
Yeah.
But I cover all because I'm a
hell of a haunt,
restaurateur.
brother. I mean,
I do. In fact, I have it here.
You're going to do a couple licks, or
since you bring it up.
Yeah. Sounds like the blues coming.
It's a hot summer day. So come on, let's play. So shake it to the right and shake it to the left. Shake it with the one you know. I love the harp, man.
Harmonica. Yeah,
music
music
actually
is great.
heals the soul. And here's
You got
an
another-
Indian flute.
Yeah, an Indian flute, right?
And I go from one extreme to another. Now, the different sounds are so cool because this one gets you up. This was like, we want to party, right?
Well, yeah, it sounded a little bit of blues beat
It's a
too.
bluesy
The
beat.
blues and gospel and jazz, the American art form, all comes from people that were very oppressed.
And the Indians, they had this haunting flute that just so mesmerized me.
The Indians you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
American Indians.
Yeah, we just celebrated them this last week. Yeah,
and they're beautiful
two-row
people.
wampum,
Every
yeah.
culture has something special to bring to the table.
Yeah.
And if we can all embrace our cultures, our instead of our differences, but our similarities.
Yeah, involve everybody.
Yeah, involve everybody.
Like a whole philharmonic orchestra, every instrument's being heard rather than just
played.
the tubas.
Absolutely.
Like we have now.
So here's the Indian flute for you.
Boy, that sounds like the American Indian movement and all the other kind of people. The Aboriginal people were so shabbily treated, and I think that's the history of the planet in a large way. The political history is that a tribe would conquer, and the thing that gave them the advantage would be some technological development that gave them a weapons advantage over the other. There's co-option, and then they'd spread their culture and everything like that. But that's the history of the world. But what you need is something that can encompass historical patterns and so forth. And then the major thing is you got to get people at the top of the political, economic class to be able to understand that there's a new transformation necessary that is relevant to the way capital is to be formed and distribution and the society organized that'll allow for more leisure, more ability for people to be in a comfortable situation, and that so you can get a thing that they can go with, and then the other, and then you have a system and have it up on the table of the decision makers as a means by setting up what Bucky Fuller, a great comprehensivist, said would be like kind of like an operating manual for Spaceship Earth that has the context taken into account comprehensively as a way of setting design parameters that includes the ecology. All of that seems to be in the offing now with the ephemeralization, the doing more with less, the technological.
Right.
We have a capability of taking care of everybody and the ecology that is now available to us that simply has not been available to us historically. So that is a moment of wake up to where we have qualitative transformation resonatingly out there in the universe, which we might be able to join.
Yes.
A speciation, the beginning of a speciation.
A new evolution. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, just like the Tibets, they had this prayer bowl.
Yeah.
And, everybody, throat singers, everybody had a different thing going on. Now,
we haven't got much going on there now.
Now listen to it. It'll build.
Yeah.
It'll build.
Oh. Boy, it did.
Richie Havens would sing on the ways of on the Wishing Well album. And my dad loved that song, Wishing Well album. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's a sweet sound, yeah. Where's that from?
This is a Tibetan prayer bowl. And they would say their prayers and they would ohm it all the time. So all our cultures have something to bring to the table. So when we say, stop waving the exclusive key to the kingdom flag, and we say that we all have a piece of the puzzle and allow all these pieces to come together.
Be like hearing every instrument in an orchestra rather than just the tubas of the powerful.
We will see the big picture.
Yeah, and but that's the way history has been.
Right.
James Joyce had Daedalus say, history is a nightmare from which we're attempting to awaken. And we may be awakening to a new way of being in the universe, again, comparable to the beginning phases of speciation.
Yes.
99.9% of all species that have ever existed evolutionarily have gone extinct.
Yeah.
It would be...
well, we may make it to Man 1. We may. I mean,
Man 1 is from the physics
world. Like
Michio
Kaku and all those
Brian
people.
Greene and string theory. Yeah.
String theory. That, if we make it to Man 1, we'll have, education will be free. Money is no longer an issue. We'll control volcanoes. And then Man 2 is like we're controlling our suns. And then Man 3 is we're going through wormholes and we're going outside the, the universe. It's just amazing what the capabilities are for the human race. They're new. Yeah,
we have to realize they weren't there. They weren't there in 2000. They weren't there 5,000 years ago. It wasn't there in 1776 when they set up this country. It wasn't there until, and the case can be made for, and the modeling can show, and it should be up on the table with all the other philosophies and so forth that are there until about the time of 1970, which we're trying to celebrate in this little... So to get the idea that it's a qualitative time of transformation, they got this new book, Abundance. A fellow, he's a Wall Street guy. And they had this conference the other day with all these cyberneticists, and that exponential capability is growing, but we still have outdated institutions that we've inherited out of history in terms of where the qualitative context has been qualitatively altered, and to wake up to that is something that should be up on the table with all of the other nostrums that are up there and talk and make up what we call the news.
The news, yeah, and that's where people like myself are trying to do. We're going to create that new qualitative change. So I think academia has failed us. I think the intellectual community has failed us because they want to keep their tenure and all that kind of stuff that's going on. The old outdated modalities. So I think it's going to come up from a bottom-up approach that people are going to recognize. It's going to be like a tsunami of love, of awakening that will shine a light, and people will either grow up, from that, or we won't make it as a species.
Well,
I'm betting that we do make it as a species. I'm betting on peace. This is a Haight-Ashbury shirt. I'm betting on honoring all the love that has been forwarded from Jesus and all those people that just came with love, trying to share what love is about. All the great teachers, from our universe,
the wisdom schools.
The wisdom schools.
Various religious orders.
Yeah, that taught about love. We get caught up in our isms, and then again, that's an exclusive key to the kingdom flag. Instead of saying, we all have a piece of the puzzle. Let's put it together to see the big picture. When we get mature enough as a society, as a species, to understand that we no longer have to worry about having all the beans and say, look at me, I got the latest yacht, but how can we be givers, not takers, and be rewarded by how much giving we're getting, and that will in turn, we will receive the abundance from that. That will be the quantitative change that marries what we were talking about, capability, and the actual reality to make that gel together, and that's the Great Awakening.
Yeah, well, in various ways, it seems to me that's been the message of almost all of our what are called wisdom schools, the basis of the spiritual traditions, the major vision. Who was it that said the major vision message that Jesus seemed to be proclaiming was, take care of the least among you. Be,
Right. Yes.
Take care of the least among you. And that has been, knowingly or unknowingly, almost roundly ignored by the political classes that have established their so-called legitimacy, historical legitimacy, on whoever had the biggest weapon systems.
And the most amount of money.
Those two go together.
They do.
If you have the most money and everything, then you could have, and you have a weapon system, and the British could conquer the East with the Indian Company and so forth, India, because they had a Gatling gun. They had an advantage in terms of weaponry, and that's been the basis by which political legitimacy, or a certain group has political so-called legitimacy, was their ability to conquer.
But there was
co-opt.
And the United States came up with a new idea, and that was a democratic ability to have freedom. And our French, the French guy that helped us a lot, Lafayette, he embraced. He says, "Oh my God," and he was a person of privilege. He had more money than
Croesus.
And he embraced what the principles that we could have a democratic society, that we could share, even though the ideals that it didn't even include black people at that time.
Well, that's what I'm trying.
But the thought was there, and see, the thought is a tangible form of mass. Once you project it, it kind of grows and develops into its own embodiment of vibration and becomes a reality. A thought, I want to say, is a tangible form of mass. Once you project it, you can receive it. It's actually like a radio signal or a TV signal. When you project it out, it gets picked up by an antenna. You can't see that mechanism, but it actually comes in. So if you turn into a certain frequency, you're going to get that. So a thought is a tangible form of mass. Once you project it, you shall receive it. That's why prayer works, because what's prayer? It's a thought, and a thought is a tangible form of mass.
Well, these are part of the wisdom schools that we've had and things, but I think it's a thing that, like in Dickensian times, people could repair to and try to get some sense of, other than absolute, a sorrow that we're surrounded by. But I don't think I would agree with you that there was any great, not in the sense that we're trying to raise here, there was any great transformation with 1776, our founding fathers. We just celebrated last week with Pamela Timmins and so forth, the two-row wampum.
Yeah.
And the Iroquois Confederation had come up. That was the Aboriginal peoples were ruthlessly decimated by the European invaders of the Western Hemisphere and so forth, as we all know.
Right.
But they had this, the Iroquois Confederation had a system of organization that included a lot of what would be called democracy. Also, deeply embedded, as probably many of our forefathers had been, in a sense of appreciation of the ecological context.
Yeah, they
were embedded in.
They
had all of that, and they very majorly, certainly Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were encouraged and inspired by the examples. The 400-year anniversary, just this week, the 400th anniversary of them, the treaty that was encouraged by, that included the Confederation, and also even Thomas Jefferson
Absolutely.
was encouraged by toward this idea of democracy that was brought to him by one of the Aboriginal peoples here. But the Aboriginal peoples, you'll notice, were treated shabbily. Now, the point being, I don't think there was any great transformation in terms of you had a feudal order that had held for 1,000 years.
But see, you're overlooking, and it's very easy to do.
I don't think there's anything particularly unique about the American model.
Yeah, but it is. And
I don't think so. I disagree with you.
I can appreciate you disagreeing, but I want to say that they picked up on that thought of democracy, and even though it was not even, and this is the thing about a thought, just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's going to instantaneously occur, because it has to develop its momentum and its mass. So even though the application of those ideologies trampled on so many different people, the Aborigines, Indians, and the black,
as always it has,
and the subservience, and all the the people that didn't have money, and the poor, and it always was catered to the rich. The thought was there, and it's slowly evolving. And now the women got the women got their right to vote, and it was so much further after even the blacks got freedom. So women were really low on the totem pole. It takes time, and people expect it to happen overnight. It hasn't, and it won't. I may not, as Martin Luther said, I have been to the mountaintop. I may not get there with you, but I've seen the second coming.
Well, the second coming of Jesus, but then
not just the second coming of Jesus. He didn't say Jesus. He said, "I've seen the second coming."
The promised land,
And the promised land was the year of enlightenment. See, everybody's waiting for Jesus to come down to save them.
No, some people.
Some people are. The right wingers. But anyway, the point being, the evangelicals or somebody of that nature. But what I'm trying to get at is that we're always putting these learned people up on pedestals and then crucifying them, But the point being is that this is an evolvation of this spirit that we call consciousness. Okay, one day we're going to shake the hands of consciousness and say, "Oh, is this what it's all about, Alfie?" It's like, it's going to take time. So let's enjoy the process. Let's celebrate that we're here on this earth for a short while.
Well, the point to be made is that you had 1,000 years of Rome, and you had a few people who ran everything. And Jesus was railing against the injustices inherent. Spartacus tried to rail against it. You had to put him up on the cross, that kind of thing. Then you had the 1,000 years of the in Europe, and there were models in the Western other parts of the world as well, where you had a king. And the king and the hereditary families for 1,000 years was assumed to be the source of political legitimacy. They were legitimate. Sure. Anything to suggest otherwise was illegitimate. And then you had a change where the Enlightenment came, the steam engine and industrialization. Then you had them set up a system in the United States of America across the ocean from the European heads of state, but that could not have set up a system like what we're talking about now, because the condition was one that didn't allow it.
I think it did, though. I think it was.
Well, I disagree.
I understand.
I think that they're trying to put that down. They call it democracy. How can you ever call it a democracy when all of the assets, all of the power is held in a tiny plutocratic class in every political system in all of the world, and that the mass of the people are still like serfs on a feudal estate in terms of the liberation of the mass of the people and the ecology? That was not possible in 1776.
Again, to make that possible to what we have today,
that maturation,
that if you didn't have it on paper and striving to the goal. In other words, if I'm going to become an Olympic swimmer or Olympic horseback rider or a musician, it's not that I pick up this instrument and say, "Oh, I'm going to play it." Most people get this instrument here and go, and they don't know how to play it. But little by little, you learn and you go, "Oh, I can do this." and then you learn to vibrato.
Yeah, I know. We know that, Stephen.
No, but that is it's a process.
Yeah,
And
but
if you
that
gotta
process
understand
has
that-
been going on ever since we came out of the cave.
That's right, and
As
it's
soon-
going to continue on until the
No, but
year
we're
of
trying-
enlightenment.
Well, we're
until
trying.
we
Yeah, but
get
what
that
we're
to-
talking about is 1776 was nothing more than a continuation of a few powerful
Absolutely.
people setting up a system that
No,
had
no,
served them.
it's an
There
important
was no more than
milestone,
that.
just like it's
It
an
wasn't-
important milestone, just like '69 when we had Woodstock. It's
No,
another-
that would be different. I would submit.
No,
That's
no,
different.
no.
That is different.
It's not
There's a-
any different because
Well, okay.
the freeing of the slaves with Lincoln, that's another milestone. See, you cannot just point out with one and say, "Oh, that's the only piece." That's like somebody saying we have the exclusive key to the kingdom.
Well, when you say that we've had a quantitative change, that is within the system.
Yes.
What we're talking about now is the consideration. It's hard. I did a program with Isaac Asimov. He said this is the defining generation.
Right.
Not 1776, not 2,000 years ago, now. And it's hard to get your mind around the fact you're at a moment of qualitative transformation that is now the promise of the time in which we're living. That's qualitative transformation.
right, but to
Speciation.
get to that
That's
point,
different. Yeah, later.
to get to that point, we had to have the coming to the United States. We had to learn from the Indians. We didn't
learn, we conquered them.
But we learned the principles of democracy.
We didn't learn the
Okay.
principles. We haven't learned.
And we applied it to a thing
Well, okay.
called the Declaration.
We
of
don't have a
Independence.
democracy. We have a
And-
political, truncated democracy and an economic
Now, but in the
plutocracy.
potential and the capability, not in reality. You remember you talked about capability and reality, and you like to distinguish capability from reality. So in the capability sense, the words meant something. The actualization takes people like myself and you to actualize freedom and to bring it to that level. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that it's going to change, but it takes time. Qualitatively,
Okay,
yes.
and you're going to have a liberation that was never possible in 1776 in real terms.
At the level of
When it comes-
capability, yes.
When
Okay?
you
At the level of
no.
capability,
When you
yes.
have there's a thing called a pregnancy, and there's a pregnancy in terms of that. 200,000 years we've been here. The time is coming for us to qualitatively transform
Absolutely.
our relationship in the cosmos.
Yes.
That is not available to us. It wasn't available to us when we were contained in Homo habilis. We can understand it in secular terms. That's the point. This is that.
Again, you want to make a defining moment, and that's
yeah,
fine.
we're coming to the defining moment.
And that's
and
great.
one defining
Yeah.
moment we have to come to in
It's
the
time.
tyranny of time. We've run out of time. And we
Such a
just get
pleasure.
talking to
Yeah.
it. But anyway, Richard
Yeah.
Havens should be celebrated, the moment of Woodstock and the moment of this. And it ought to be put up on the table of our leading intellectual and political leaders
It will be,
in order
Harold.
to see that
Yeah,
and make
it
it
will
real,
be.
because there's a lot of very, very dysfunction in the world now.
And we want to say
Your pleasure to have had the conceptions of Stephen Neskis up from Virginia, and it was a friend of. We're celebrating the memory of Richie Havens, a major figure, and a moment of qualitative transformation that was signaled by this Woodstock Festival as well as other things. Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow with a program with Richie from some time ago, talking about the communication of this new reality that could be part of the pattern. Thank you for viewing. Coming back tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
it's a pleasure, Harold.
Pleasure.
Always.
Okay. Okay. Okay.